Hello, I'm just getting live on Facebook as well. Cool. Awesome. Great. Wonderful. Can people hear me on Instagram? Yeah, great. Hello. Wonderful. Cool. So you're just going to wait about a minute. I'll get started in a second. Hello. Welcome to the King's Head online skills share session. I'm Ali Wright, and I'm a professional theatre photographer, and I'm going to be talking about theatre photography today. So yeah, I wanted to say thank you to the King's Head for having me today. So they're doing lots of these online skills share sessions. They're 1 p.m. every day. So if you have a particular specialism or something like that, do check them out. And you can also view all of their old ones on their ones from kind of previous weeks on their website. So have a look at those as well. Wonderful. Cool. Great. I've worked with the King's Head on a variety of different projects. Most recently, I shot their double bill of Tosca and La Boheme, and I've got a picture of that up here. I am going to be showing some pictures, and they might not be the best viewing quality, but hopefully it'll give you an idea. And I think the King's Head do a blog after the session, so if you do want to look at them in a bit more detail, you can do. And I also shot Coming Clean. So those are both shows that had really successful runs at the King's Head and then transferred to the West End to Trafalgar Studios, which is where I photographed them. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about getting started as a theatre photographer, about how to tell visual stories in your images, and also some advice for directors, producers, marketing departments, anybody who works with photographers, because I think it's good if we all have a little bit of an idea of what we all do. So yeah, hopefully you'll get a bit of an insight into some of the things that go in the photographer's brain. A little bit of a disclaimer. So there aren't really any rules or anything particularly set in stone as theatre photography, and I'm sure most photographers have really different approaches. So a lot of this is just my approach. So do feel free to kind of cherry pick bits of either of these things. And if you are interested in theatre photography, also check out Nick Rutter's talk. So he did a talk on theatre photography on the same platform on King's Head Online a couple of weeks ago, and that's on their website. He's got kind of bucket loads of experience, and I learned loads on that one as well. So yeah, do look at that. Cool. Yeah, I am going to be taking questions as well, so I will intermittently be checking both platforms. But yeah, hopefully I'm going to show you some images and talk a little bit about the things I think about when I'm photographing, and I hope these will be kind of practical tools that you can implement into photographs. So yeah, theatre photographers work in two major categories. So one is documentation, so that's production shots, rehearsal shots, anything with live events. And then we also create original artwork for publicity images, marketing, posters, that kind of stuff. I'm going to mainly be talking about production shots today, but if you do have questions on promotional images, I can also answer those as well. So I'm still relatively new as a theatre photographer. I started photography professionally in 2018 and learnt to use a camera in kind of late 2017. And since then have shot just over 250 productions and created about nearly 50 images for artwork. And I came to theatre photography through, a love of theatre, really. I'd always liked theatre, and I left school. I didn't attend university, and I knew I wanted to work in theatre, but I didn't really know where. So I was an actor for a bit, I was a director for a bit, and none of these things really, none of them really gelled with me. So I'd always known photography was something I was interested in, but they didn't teach it in my school. I'd never learned to use a camera, and I kind of felt that was a closed avenue to me. And I remember going into camera shops and being completely out-jargoned by sales reps, just not feeling very welcome in those spaces. So in the end, after that false start, I decided to do some kind of beginner photography courses at CityLit, and the London School of Photography, and learned the kind of very, very basics of using a camera. And yeah, found it really difficult at first, found the technical side really challenging. But what I really liked was the ability to kind of, I was always thinking about theatre because I knew I wanted to photograph theatre. So the ability to kind of blend those two things together was really exciting to me. Kind of being able to capture theatrical stories in this kind of isolated single frame was, yeah, really, really fascinating to me. So yeah, I learned to use a camera and then practiced until those kind of technical elements felt instinctive, and that took a while. But yeah, I'd say those stories are the most important thing when you're taking images. So yeah, the technique comes with time. So I'd say try and focus on that. And I started my career by offering to shoot work for free. And I know a lot of photographers have to do this, and it's really not ideal. But I have some advice if you are in that kind of portfolio building stage of your career, which is like you're doing a job for free, so you get to set the boundaries. So what I did is I limited the amount of shots I'd give away for free, and also set a really clear period of time that I was willing to work for free. For me, and this will depend, but for me that was about 2 months. And after that, people contacted me and asked if I'd shoot their shows for free. And what I was able to do was say, no, I've built my portfolio, but I could offer you really great rates. So what that enabled me to do was kind of transfer those people who came looking for a free photography session, be able to transfer those into my sort of very first paid clients. So I think, yeah, being in control of that process is really important. And like, yeah, that's your process. So guard it. Yeah, and I worked part-time as an usher at the same time. And that was hard trying to balance the two. But what it did enable me to do was kind of invest the money I made from photography in my equipment and then live on my usher's wage as I'd been doing previously. And that sort of accelerated becoming fully freelance. I would also suggest, if you're starting out, reach out to other photographers. Like, everybody likes to hear that you like their work, and ask them for advice. I did this at the very beginning with Helen Murray, who's one of the best theatre photographers in the country, and she was really helpful and has been a massive lifeline to me. So yeah, do that. And yeah, people employing photographers can also really help emerging photographers. I think if you contact a photographer and they're busy, or they are too expensive for you, ask them about emerging photographers. And yeah, so you can kind of widen the pool of the people you're working with. And I think it's important to also, for photographers and for employers, to think a little bit about diversity as well. Like, theatre photographers are predominantly white and predominantly male. And I think if you can seek out photographers who sit outside of that as well, that's a really important thing. And as photographers, I think we need to do that as well, of who are the names that you're putting forward, and are you closing the door to new people coming up by only ever giving out the same names? Because there's a lot of theatre to photograph. So I think it's important to try and divide that work and give seats at the table to new and emerging photographers. Cool. I'm just going to check for any questions. Oh no, we're all good. I'm just going to plow on. If you have questions, let me know. But otherwise, I'm just going to talk. Cool. So the other thing that beginner photographers or emerging photographers often struggle with is kit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I navigated that at the beginning, because I was also very confused. The best advice I could give with kit is start small, by item by item, and really get to know each element of your kit before you buy the next one. And also, you can afford what you can afford, and don't let that kind of hinder you too much. I'll show you what I learned on a friend's camera and then eventually bought my own. So I started with this camera. So this is a Canon 5D Mark III, amazingly sturdy, fantastic camera. I now shoot on the Mark IVs, but I started on the Mark III. And then with one lens, which is a 24-70 2.8 aperture. So pretty good in low light, not the best. But as I say, that was that was all I could afford, and that really, you know, that did limit the range of images that I could take. But I think it's important when you're starting out to just kind of go, well, that's my lot for now, and that's okay, because there's always going to be photographers with better equipment than you. You know, some photographers have, you know, 20, 30 grand's worth of equipment, and I think focusing on what your images say and the stories you're telling is the way that you can kind of put to bed those ideas. I don't have enough equipment. Nick Fratter's also saying that his first cameras are Mark II. Yeah, they're brilliant. Yeah. Nikon and Sony also do great cameras. I'm just going to say that. Cool. I've got a question from Rebecca Pitt, who's also done a King's Head talk. She's an extraordinary poster designer. Do you work on personal projects for your artistic development? Are you working on anything interesting during lockdown? I didn't for a really long time, and I kind of learnt, all of my photography was learning on jobs. And then at the beginning of 2020, I started doing one shoot a month. That was a personal project, to trial out new lighting techniques or work with people that I really wanted to work with. And I have done a little bit in lockdown. I haven't felt overly creative, but there's been a couple of times I've reached for my camera, and I'm trying not to pressure that situation too much. So I've done a couple of self-portraits because I haven't had anyone else to photograph, of capturing kind of some difficulties with mental health in lockdown. So yeah, I have done a couple. Cool. Yeah, now I'm going to talk about production photography. So when you start taking images of shows, you'll probably start in fringe theatre, which is, like, all theatre photography is actually really tricky, because you're dealing with low light, fast changing light, quick moving people, all sorts. But fringe theatre is a kind of extra challenge because, you know, sometimes you have really beautiful lighting designs and set designs, but they're often not as elaborate. Sorry, I'm just reading comments. You often don't have as much of those kind of help by the big sets and the light to make really nice images. So I think thinking about fringe as a training ground, because, you know, if you can make shots with one actor under one lighting state for an hour, look to tell the story of the show and look really interesting, when you get to shooting an opera that looks like a classical painting already, you're just laughing, and it's you've had that training of really trying to squeeze out great shots from limited visuals, not necessarily limited content, but limited visuals. And I think, yeah, directors, producers, theatre makers, they can all help in dress runs when photographers have joined you for the dress run. And I'd say what's really useful when I walk into a rehearsal is that if the director or the producer has decided on some really, really key moments of the show, like, of course, photographers are going to photograph the whole show, but knowing where they happen, how long they happen for, and the duration of them are really useful, because what it means is those images that, you know, that amazing moment when it rains on stage, I want that, and I want to give it to all the press. So tell the photographer that information, because they don't know the show like you know the show. And it gives them a chance to get to kind of plan that shot rather than respond to it necessarily in the moment. And then also, if you can, of course, time sensitive, have some time at the end for a photographer to go back and have a little second go at shooting. Cool. Great. So yeah, the way I kind of approach for production photography, and this, I just made up this process, so I'm going to tell you about it anyway. So I think about it in a kind of twofold approach. So at first I think about documentation. So that's not one. Oh, I didn't say this. I had another thing to say about kit. I'm going all around the place. Kit doesn't necessarily have to be super pricey. This is, I use like speed lights. These are 30 quid speed lights, and I use them for most of my promotional work that's outdoors. So this one is an example of that. So that's from the promotional image for One Jewish Boy that was at Trafalgar Studios. And this was all shot in camera. So it was torrential rain in the middle of a road in Hackney, and I just wanted to show it because normally I use studio lights, but I was just amazed that these firstly would still like coped with torrential rain, and also I think it's got a really professional finish, even though really cheap kit. So yeah, don't always buy the expensive things. Cool. I'm going to carry on talking about productions photography now. Great. Yeah, so I first think about documentation. So I try and take shots that look exactly like the show. So this one is from Neville Holt Opera. This is Midsummer Night's Dream. And I do nice wide. Designers will absolutely love you for these images, so take loads of them. And it's kind of exactly, usually from where the audience sits, what does the show look like? No bells, no whistles, no photography tricks. And once I've got a series of those shots all the way through, I then think about interpretation. And this, for me, is where you get to put your stamp on the images, and not your I personally, I don't think I have a style, and I try to reflect the show's style. But it is where you get to kind of put your opinion in and focus on things that you think is interesting. So I will show you some examples of these. And what I do to get these is I use a series of questions to ground me and demonstrate to me visually what I'm like, and tell me what I'm trying to demonstrate visually. Cool. So my first question is, how do the characters relate to each other? So this is from Kill Climate Desires at Pleasance. And really, really clear how these characters relate. They kind of converge and clash in the center of the image. And I've kind of created that with framing. So that's a nice, clear relationship shot. This one is from Opera Holland Park, the Traviata. And I wanted to show this because this is a massive party scene. So there's loads of champagne and dancing and all sorts. And I wanted to show just like, if there are big epic things going on, have a little look at what else is going on in the scene. Are there intimate moments that you're missing because you're only looking at big picture rather than those small picture? Then also, this is an immersive show. So this is at Boomtown Festival, the company Dank Parish. And I wanted to show this because it's thinking about including the audience as a character in your shots. So I've given them nice big billing in the frame, nice and large, and then they kind of center around the action. And how this tells the story of the show is we as the viewer look at it and we cast ourselves in the role of the audience. And it's very tactile. We know it's playful. We know it's interactive. So I think thinking about how you tell the show visually and kind of embed it into your composition and that kind of stuff. I'm just going to check Facebook. Cool. Great. And then the next question I ask is, what is the playwright, designer, or director trying to say? So this one is a shot from Little Baby Jesus at the Orange Tree. And in the set was a kind of giant halo. And in the text, there were all these references to religion. And it's about a group of school kids in North London, and their stories kind of intertwine, but there's kind of like ever-present kind of aspects of religion kind of woven into the text. So the way I've thought about it is the actor was standing here, and I was waiting for a moment that would connect him, so connect his story with the stories of the wider theme. So as soon as he popped his finger up, for me, that was when the themes were tied into the image, and that was therefore the story, basically. Next question is, what is unique about the show, and what's its kind of USP? So this one is from Going Through at the Bush. So this show is BSL integrated, so the sign language is kind of woven into the show itself. So I really wanted to give that prominence in my shots. So we've got it kind of shadowed here, and then also nice central framing. This again is Going Through. The subtitles were all projection mapped onto the set. So I wanted to give those kind of big prominence. Like this is like this show is extraordinary because of these features and also the performances. So I wanted to give those two elements kind of equal billings in the shots. And then the last question I ask is, how does this make me feel? And it's important to say that you might photograph shows that just like aren't your cup of tea. And in that instance, I start asking, if this was my cup of tea, if this was my jam, how would this make me feel? So one I did get to show how I felt was this shot. So this is a show called Sugarcoat at Vault Festival this year. And it's a gig theatre piece with Riot Girl music, loads of attitude. And obviously, as a photographer, I don't get to record sound. So instead, I'm trying to capture that feeling in an image. And I thought the kind of hair toss and that kind of stuff, we all know what that feels like. So I wanted to include that so potential audiences might know what the music in this show could sound like from the image. Cool, I'm just going to check for any questions. Cool. No, I think we're good. I'm just going to crack on. Cool. So yeah, it's important to remember that you're answering these questions visually. So sometimes a moment of tension will happen in the text, but that's not really necessarily any use to you, because until that happens visually, you can't record it. So it's about kind of slightly ignoring the text, kind of following it in the back of your head, but actually using the visuals. I've got a question from Annie. When shooting a dress rehearsal, how many photos will you take and how many will you give to the client? I think all photographers might think they take hundreds and thousands of photos. I really, really do. Like, I'm very trigger happy, and I think there's a lot of schools of like thought on photography of like trying to hark back to the days of film and you only have a certain number of shots. But the way I look at it is it's like whatever it takes to get what you want. So yeah, I'd say, you know, into the thousands maybe for a show. And then I would normally give about 100 to a company to choose from. And actually the longest part of the process for me is deciding those 100 rather than the actual editing of the work. How do you choose to edit them? With difficulty. I use a program called Photo Mechanic, which lets you view them very quickly, so because they're massive files. And yeah, I think I choose them by getting a good spread across the show is my first thing. And then I'm looking for stories. I'm looking for things that answer those same questions, really. Have I worked, talking of sound, have you worked with video as well? Increasingly, the theatre advertising will do shots, but also want video. So yeah, I haven't done video at all. I'm only 3 years into learning how to use a camera. So and I feel like I've got so much to learn on that still. So for me, I'm kind of spending some time with photography and then might look into video later on. And then I'd love to buy more photography of shows beyond the pre-production. Maybe theatres could publish review of the year. Also, if you do want to buy more photos of shows, like contact the photographers directly. Lots of theatre photographers, their archives are represented by agents, so you can contact their agents or them directly. Photographers, particularly now, are desperate. So we'll probably really like people interested in buying their work. Cool. Great. And then I've got a couple more images to show. And this I wanted to show. So after I've answered those questions, I start to think about how I can use like the photographic techniques in my kind of arsenal of things I know how to do to also think about the themes of the show. So some examples of this. So this is Jewel at Vault Festival. And it's about a woman with dual Persian and British heritage. So what I did in this shot is I prioritized my shutter speed. I tried to blur the face, and then all my other settings kind of worked around that because I wanted to like allude to the themes of kind of confusion in identity and that kind of stuff. So that's an example of how you can, the things that you know how to do, how you can link it to story. This one is Marco at Vault Festival 2019. I've got another shot of this is with bells and whistles. This is a little bit more like it actually looks. So this is shot at 30 millimeters, so a little bit of distortion, but not too much. It's a fine shot. It's not great. But this one is shot at 17 millimeters, so I'm using a really wide angle lens. And what that does is it distorts the room and kind of gives us this V shape. And I'm really close. I'm probably about that far away, and I'm with my camera up. And what that does is the theme, it's about a cyclist in the Tour de France. So the themes of endurance and power and sport and all of that kind of stuff are in the kind of like inside the shot, I guess. And he kind of pops out. So yeah, that's the kind of difference for me. That one tells a much better story. And then I also wanted to talk a tiny bit about composition. So this one is from Superho at the Royal Court, a photo call of Superho. And this one is a nice example of using negative space. So I could have shot this in a portrait, just going down here, but I think the nice wide background gives the eye a little bit of breathing room. And also it gives us time to see Nicole here, and then also the prop that's associated with her character, which is a kind of red stripe just against the pink carpet there. So I think sometimes thinking about how the viewer will look at the image and that kind of thing are really important. Cool, that's kind of all I wanted to show you. But I also wanted to say that, this kind of stuff is just practice, and you don't even have to be taking photos to practice it. So I think developing that eye, like look at newspapers, look at the work of photojournalists and say, what is the story here? And how do I tap into that? And why do I think that? And also, what has the photographer done to make me feel that or make me think that? And, look at Instagram, magazines, things you walk past, all that kind of stuff. Because I think what it does is it means when you hold your camera up to your eye, you've got a kind of language and about why an actor on the left-hand side of the frame in the foreground looks different, and what that story tells that's different. Cool, I'm gonna just check questions. Amazing. Do you have shots taken by you which are your greatest ever, which you would like to share? It's really hard. I think the nice thing about photography is you constantly think something's the best thing you've ever taken. So you take an image, you're like, this is the best thing I've ever taken. And then as time goes on, you're like, oh, I don't actually like that anymore. So I think that's a constant changing position, but it's nice because it makes you realize that you're improving, that those things that you were like, that's extraordinary, I can't believe I took that, soon become the things that you take out of your portfolio and replace with something that you enjoy more. How many lenses do you have when shooting a play? So my current kit, I shoot on 2 Canon 5D Mark IVs. So before I had 2 cameras, I was constantly lens changing in the dark, which is an interesting endeavor. And now I have, so I have the kind of, what do I have? I have a 16 to 24, 24 to 70, 70 to 200. So kind of covering all the focal lengths. And then I also have a 50mm 1.4, which I use mainly for immersive shows, really, because the domestic lighting in them is often far more difficult. So I need that little bit extra of wide aperture to help me out. Do I always shoot in manual? I do always shoot in manual. I know lots of people use shutter speed or aperture priority, but I was taught in manual, and I have I've never got out of it. I've never even tried the other settings, actually, but yes, I do always shoot in manual. Amazing. Cool. So yeah, I want to just say thank you for listening. I know I've kind of blasted through a lot of stuff there, but as I say, the images, I'll chat to the King's Head and hopefully they can go up on their blog. Thank you so much for listening, and if you'd like to follow my work, you can do. I'm at Ali Wright _photographs on Instagram and at Ali Wright Photo on Twitter. And yeah, if you are a emerging photographer and you'd like a chat, I and lots of photographers have time, so do reach out, and maybe an online coffee and that sort of stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And if there are any more questions, now's your chance to shout them. But otherwise, yeah, thank you so much. Cool, I'm just going to wait for one moment for any more questions. Cool, amazing, that's great. Thank you.